Thank you for joining us for tonight's presentation of Freedom Journal TV. We are here today at the University of Akron with Elaine Brown, former chairperson of the Black Panther Party. We'll call 5 people, tell them to tune in to Freedom Journal TV, your local access to the media. Tonight's programming is being sponsored by the Women's Studies Department at the University of Akron. Once again, we're going to bring you a presentation by Elaine Brown, former chairperson of the Black Panther Party.
To get started. My name is Pat Milhoff, and I'm Director of Women's Studies here at the University of Akron. And we're excited to have this program for you today. And I just wanted to take a minute and tell you how this program unfolded, because it's kind of fun. And the way it unfolded is that one of the graduate students in Women's Studies worked on the vagina monologues. And one of the people who participated in the vagina monologues was Erica Abrams. And so we kind of got to know her. Then we got a grant from AAUW to do some sexual harassment training on campus this year, and Erica participated in that, along with Gail McWilliams from NOW and Denise Hollenbach from Battered Women's Shelter. So we all kind of started hanging out together, and we all said, let's do something. And so we remembered that Erica had told Gail that Elaine Brown was her mother. And so we said, you know, this is such an important election. And we have so much good energy going around with AAUW and NOW and Battered Women and the Vagina Monologues. Let's all get together and bring Elaine Brown to town. So this is what the result is, and we're here today, and we are very, very excited. I really want to encourage you to stay throughout the day. We have a couple national speakers from American Association of University Women and the National Organization for Women who also will be speaking throughout the day. But I knew when we were going to bring Elaine Brown to campus that there was someone on our campus who would be very excited, because she's a historian who teaches African American women. And I called her and I said, would you like to introduce Elaine Brown? And she said, I would love to do that. So Dr. Rousseau from our history department.
Oh, but it might be on. Can I use this? Yeah. Are they both on? Is this on? Yes, good. Okay, this is off. Thanks very much, Pat. And thanks to Pat for organizing today's events, for bringing our keynote speaker to campus today, and especially for giving. Way louder. Is this? I need to. Okay. I want to thank Pat Milhoff for organizing today's event.
Can you hear her?
No.
You're going to have to go back to
I don't like that one. I'm not gonna...
You don't want the handheld. I'll go find somebody while she's talking.
Okay. That's better, right? Okay. I'm going to thank for the 3rd time Pat Milhoff for organizing today's events, for bringing our keynote speaker to campus today, and for giving me the honor of introducing her. Elaine Brown is an author most recently of The Condemnation of Little B, the story of how Michael Lewis was railroaded into prison by a justice system that cares more about incarcerating random black people than meting out justice. She's a musical artist, writing, producing, and singing on 2 albums, some of which have been recently re-released by Black Panther Records. She's attended Temple University, UCLA, Mills College, Southwestern School of Law, and the Philadelphia Conservatory of Music. Currently, she serves as Vice President of the Dr. Huey P. Newton Foundation, Executive Director of the Michael Lewis Little B Legal Defense Fund, and as co-founder of Mothers Advocating Juvenile Justice and the National Alliance for Radical Prison Reform. She's also a member of the Geechee Council of Georgia. Is that pronounced right?
Absolutely.
Thank you. More than this, Elaine Brown's name literally sends chills up the backs of my students who read her autobiography, A Taste of Power, just a year ago, permitting them a glimpse of how one could live the life of a black woman and a revolutionary in 1970s America. In fact, few of us know what it means to participate in revolutionary politics. In 1968, Brown joined the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. And I want to repeat the name of that party, the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. The name of the party reflects both its economic and political affinity with socialism, and the Panthers' first goal of protecting black people from the police and the entire legal establishment that had developed in cities to keep black people confined spatially, impoverished materially, and terrorized psychically. The history of the Black Panthers is worth pausing to take note of. Expanding the scope and deepening the philosophical engagement with black and brown people's struggle against colonialism and capitalism worldwide, the Panthers far exceeded the revolutionary visions of previous US-based civil rights organizations, such as the NAACP, CORE, SNCC, and others, by identifying food, shelter, healthcare, and education as basic human rights that, along with civil rights like due process, fair trials, the right to vote, had been systematically as well as effectively denied to black people in America since the abolition of slavery. Panthers recognized better than most the extent to which the institutionalization of racism in the form of purposeful and de facto segregation had left the majority of black Americans enslaved by poverty, poor health, social indignity, political disfranchisement, more than 100 years after the Civil War and the 13th Amendment had declared them a free people. Black Panthers set about to restore black communities by raising black consciousness of the value and inherent dignity of black people, while at the same time addressing the most pressing needs of a people cut off not just from wealth and economic opportunities, but from basic health care and resources. One of the Panthers' first revolutionary steps, and probably most successful tactics as an organization, was the establishment of free breakfast for children programs in their hometown of Oakland, California, where black children were defeated by hunger, often before they ever stepped one foot into school. Free health clinics followed, along with liberation schools and free grocery, legal aid, and shoe programs. Since the state would not come to the aid of black people, indeed, since it only addressed blacks through its repressive mechanisms of police, courts, and prisons, the Panthers modeled and helped create a state within a state for what was a nation within a nation. Elaine Brown became chair of the Black Panther Party in 1974 and helped turn that organization more firmly towards electoral politics following a highly publicized and nearly successful 1973 campaign to elect well-known Panther Bobby Seale as mayor of Oakland, California. She herself ran for Oakland, California City Council on the Black Panther Party ticket a few years later. After 30 years of activism and dissent against repressive forms of state violence and in support of share the wealth campaigns, Elaine Brown remains what she calls an underground messenger, having been excluded through legal machinations reminiscent of the techniques of the old Jim Crow South, from participating in a white and wealth-controlled mayoral election just last year in Brunswick, Georgia. Given the dangerous times in which we live, the state violence and political corruption that has come to define America at home and around the globe, I look with awe upon those who stand up and continue to give voice to the simple but revolutionary sentiments, empower the people, and share the wealth. Like a reversal of the tides that burst open the levees last year to drown poor people whom the state decided were eminently dispensable. Let's hope that your underground message bursts through the barricades to human justice that have been erected, that have kept wealth and freedom collected in far too few hands. Please join with me in welcoming to the University of Akron a revolutionary force, Elaine Brown.
Introduction, then I have too much to deal with now. Can you hear me? Because I hate to take this.
He's supposed to be working on it.
This is probably better though, huh? But I do want to thank you for that powerful introduction, because it was a correct analysis, and that's what I always like to talk about. That's always the theme of my conversations. We're going to take some questions. I'm going to look at the clock, make sure I don't go over time. So somebody give me the hook if you think I'm going too far. Thank you very much, Dr. Milhoff and Women's Studies, for bringing me here. I have no idea that anybody would get up at this time of morning on a Saturday to come and hear somebody talk, but that's a good sign that somebody got up to do this. And I'm glad to be here. You know, as was my introduction, was that I was the chair of the Black Panther Party. I always like to remind people that I was actually the chairman of the Black Panther Party. I wasn't the chairperson, chairwoman on the chair. I was the chairman of the Black Panther Party because I took over the slot that was called chairman. So I continued to be called chairman. And a lot of people wondered, well, how did she become the chairman of the Black Panther Party? You know, it was a paramilitary organization dominated by men in numbers and kind of rough situation. So I had a guy ask me once, and matter of fact, it was at Spelman College. And it was so funny because why anybody would ask such a question at an all-women, black women's school, which you know is my audience, right? It's kind of dumb to ask any kind of question that isn't perfectly complimentary to what I'm saying. But anyway, he asked me, said, you know, it's said that you became the head of the Black Panther Party because you slept with Eldridge Cleaver, and you slept with Huey Newton, and you slept with Bunchy Carter. Is that true? And so I said, well, the first thing I have to say is that I never slept with Bunchy Carter. I wanted to now. It just didn't come my way. And the second thing I want to say is that Eldridge Cleaver slept with half the women in the state of California, in and out of the Black Panther Party, with and without their permission. And that Huey Newton certainly slept with the other half, or they tried to sleep with, because Huey was just that fine. And none of those women, however, became the chairman of the Black Panther Party. So if you want to have a correct analysis, the analysis is, now either that was not the criterion for becoming chairman of the Black Panther Party, or I had the baddest pussy in the state of California. Now, those of you who are offended by that, you might as well get on up. It's getting ready to get rough. But in any case, it's like people who ask me, weren't the Black Panthers chauvinists? Well, yeah. Where did you think we got these brothers from revolutionary heaven? You know, where were we going to get non-chauvinist black males, or any males, in a patriarchal construct? Where was that going to happen? It wasn't going to happen. That's like asking, is there still chauvinism in America? As though chauvinism is really the question that we're dealing with here. But our effort was not to deal with chauvinism. That was not why the Black Panther Party came into existence, although clearly the oppression of women is an issue that we addressed, and I'll get to that in a minute. But our effort wasn't cultural at all. That is to say, we didn't intend to make certain changes within the existing milieu to make women equal with men to oppress other women, for example. Things like this. We'll get to that too in a minute. Our intention was to create and instigate change, and change in the fundamental conditions in this society so that we would end the oppression of black people. That was our immediate goal. And then ultimately to end all forms of oppression and human exploitation. But we did try to create a revolutionary culture inside the party. We tried to change ourselves. We did a lot of different things, particularly with respect to gender. But our conditions dictated the way we behaved with each other, as conditions do dictate culture. It doesn't arise from nothing, you know. So that, for example, in talking about men and women, well, you had, when we started, as was mentioned, the free breakfast programs, well, brothers got up and cooked the free breakfast. You know, people that had yesterday been gangbanging were now in a church at 5 o'clock in the morning cooking breakfast for their little brothers and sisters. And this was a phenomenon that had to be seen, especially when you consider that these were truly almost Slausons in the area that I lived in LA, who were the predecessors to the Crips and the Bloods, getting up in the morning and cooking breakfast for children. Imagine that. Just, I mean, it's so once action takes place, then the role just changes immediately. And everybody in the Black Panther Party was assigned a role based on what you could do. If you could shoot a gun, you're probably going to be in the security. If you couldn't, you probably have to do something else. people like me edited the paper. So, get my drift. So, and at the same time, we did recognize that we thought of each other as, we took away gender references. We were brothers and sisters, and then ultimately we became comrades. We used that term to even eliminate that. And then we talked about no task too big or no task too small. So it depended on what you could do as to what you did do in the Black Panther Party. Of course, as I said, it was a paramilitary structure, so you took orders in the Black Panther Party. We were 24-hour Panthers, we used to say. No part-time revolutionaries. So we were all committed, and by this time, recognizing the police repression and the police assaults, we began to think of ourselves as one. Now, when it came to gender problems, I'll give you a quick example. I remember in the early days, we lived pretty collectively, and when it came to gender problems, we all slept in the same places, mostly on the floor, mostly in sleeping bags. And I can remember there was a brother that came up to my sleeping bag and tried to put his hand on me and unzipped the sleeping bag and put his hand on me, and I pushed him away, but I didn't know really what to do. And so I went to my mentor, my comrade, and my hero, John Huggins, who was a pretty little brother, pretty small in stature. And I said, John, what's the rule on this? What do we do? This guy, he said, wait a minute, I'll be right back. So he said, here, take this and sleep with this. Gave me a little hatchet, So, let me tell you something. That hatchet really is an anti-rape kid. When you sleep with a hatchet, you can believe the average person thinking about rape is not going to roll up on you. Okay? And we did that, and I did sleep with that hatchet, and it did tend to keep a lot of people from thinking differently. And then at one point when Huey Newton got out of prison, we had to read everything. We read Mao, we read Marx, we read everything. We read Jean Genet, we read Richard Wright, we read everything. To learn, to think. That's what our idea was, to try to understand the nature of our oppression, understand where we were and how to think. And so one of the books that was mandatory reading at the time was something called the Height Report. Some of you might be old enough to remember the Height Report. It was a woman named Cher Height, who was a psychologist. I think she's still alive. I'm not speaking her in the past tense. I don't know. I think she's written something recently. And she wrote a book called the Height Report, which was basically a study of a variety of women, number of women at the time, crossing over age, cultural, race, sexual identity, anything. They were all just women in terms of women and sexuality. And the reason it became such a big deal is because the Height Report had two big things that it identified that nobody had spoken about. There was a common theme among women. And the first one was, that everybody was shocked by, the first one was that women masturbated. And people were like, the brothers in the Black Panther Party were like, what you mean? You don't need me. How was that possible? And the second one was that women faked orgasm. And I cannot tell you the amount of debate there was in the Black Panther Party over these two issues. But we examined them thoroughly, I trust me. And so nobody realizes that we attempted to change that culture, to understand who we were. What would the revolutionary culture look like? How would we even know it? Given, as Khalil Gibran said so beautifully and famously, our children are not our children. They're sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. They live in the house of tomorrow, which we cannot enter, not even in our dreams. How do we know what it's going to look like when there's no patriarchy? How do we know? So we tried to imagine, and we tried to do that while fighting against the police, while creating all these conditions. So were we successful? Was there chauvinism, rampant chauvinism? I would say yes. But you have to remember there was another thing. The brothers that cooked the breakfast on one side, on the other side you had sisters who had guns. And let me tell you about armed sisters when you want to talk about what you plan on doing. It's what changes the dynamic, and the culture becomes immediately different. I assure you. But our goal was not gender equality. Our goal was freedom. And that's something we haven't talked about in this country very much. This is like old-fashioned civil rights, 1960s, anachronistic term called freedom. Our goal was freedom. It wasn't gender equality. That has become a new millennium term that doesn't really resonate with very much of anything as to a gender, because we have to talk about what does that mean. But at this moment, I want to say our goal was to develop strategies to become free. But in order to have a correct strategy, or a strategy that we thought was going to be correct, we had to have a correct analysis. The first thing we understood is that we were oppressed. Now that's an interesting thing, because most people, black people today, you have a whole lot of black people today who don't even think black people today are oppressed, despite the poverty rates, infant mortality rates, despite all the realities. 2 million people in prison in the United States, 50% black, have no idea how this happened. Are black people criminals? Is there a criminal gene, super predator gene, something like this? People study this. You're laughing, but people study this stuff. Anyone who's in academia will tell you that people have studies out on whether or not there is a criminal gene, as though this is a statement that anybody can make that makes any sense whatsoever. And just so we know that there isn't a criminal gene, just so we resolve that very quickly for that one person who might be sitting here wondering. As the Human Genome Project has proved to us, if we didn't know before that, behavior is not dictated by genetics, okay? It goes over there in the category of behavior and social constructs and so forth, and genetics has to do with the biology, whether or not your eyes are blue or a bunch of other stuff. Come to find out there were not that many differences among human beings. Thought there were 140,000 genomes, and it turns out there were only 30,000 differences, and they mostly go to very irrelevant things, because, as it's been determined, blacks in America have more genetic composition similarities to whites in America than to blacks in Africa, only because of environmental influences. So let's not get excited. And plus, we know that crime is a political question. And how do we know that crime is a political question? Because we see it. Well, here's how we know. We look at a situation like, and this is the one I always like to tell because it makes me at once sad, and it just points up some other things. But you remember when George Bush I told Colin Powell to go and arrest Noriega, remember? And he said, Colin, he said, yes. Colin, go over there. Noriega used to be my best friend. I knew he was trafficking drugs, but that didn't bother me, because we brought Noriega up to the Fort Benning at the School of the Americas, and we've had him in the CIA and on the payroll, so we don't have a real problem with Noriega, but I'm mad at him today, so I want you to go down there in Panama and arrest, and plus we put him in position, arrest Noriega, right? And Colin Powell went on down there, took those Black Hawk helicopters, all kinds of troops on the ground, missiles, firearms, armed to the teeth, swept through all of Panama. Noriega moved to the left, moved to the right, went into the church. They finally captured him. And as a result, they arrested him and brought him to justice, as the Bushes like to say. Brought Noriega to justice, and in the process, 5,000 Panamanian people were killed. 5,000 people that never called any of us out of our name. Don't even know Panama. Most people couldn't even find Panama. It's like Iraq. You could put Iraq on the map, most people couldn't even find it. You think I'm kidding? Don't know nothing about Iraq, don't know anything about Panama. Killed 5,000 people. They said, Colin, somebody asked him, said, don't you think that was a bit excessive, that force that you put into Panama just to arrest Noriega? He said, I don't deal with 5,000 people killed. Some people say more than that. He said, I don't deal with numbers, I deal with results. And not one person has charged Colin Powell or George Bush I with mass murder. You don't see anybody in prison who killed 5,000 people today. You can't even find find enough people in one prison who've killed 5,000 people. But they're criminals. But Colin Powell is not a criminal. And we really don't see it that way. Or it's like the case of this boy that I talked about, little B, who's charged with a murder. They called him a thug. They had on the news, super predator. This bad boy is evil in the city. And that wasn't just white people. That was black people calling for the rope. And little B was just a 13-year-old boy charged with a murder that he, by the way, didn't have to commit, but that wasn't the point. At the same time in Eugene, Oregon, you had a 14-year-old boy named Kip Kinkle, a nice little white boy from Exurbia, whatever that is, in Eugene, Oregon, Exurbia, and Kip got up one morning at 14 years old, killed mom and dad, stuffed them all up underneath the house, put some explosives in the house, put a backpack on his back with a couple of guns in it, had an assault rifle in his hand, and had a hunting knife strapped to his chest, and went off to school, middle school, I believe, and shot up 25 people. 3 of them died. And they had, oh, people crying and carrying on. You know, we've seen the scene a lot lately, haven't we? People just crying, carrying on. Banner across the school. Banner headlines reflected in the headlines of not only in Eugene, Oregon, but across the nation. And it said, why, Kip? Why'd you do it? Nobody said Kip was a thug. We don't even think of him as a thug even now.
Come on.
Sitting here. Kip was just a good kid who just did a bad thing. You know, it's a question of too many violent videos. It's a question of teen angst. It's a question of confusion. Did he have a problem with mom and dad? Well, obviously he did. He killed him. Now, my point is, nobody called him a thug or a criminal. And they're not going to put Kip Kinkle in a prison with an armed robber from the hood. Because Kip needs to be protected from armed robbers from the hood, you know? So crime is a political question. Now, when we understand that, then we know that analysis is very important. So we understood that as black people in America, we were oppressed. And how was that reflected, that oppression? We didn't have the resources that we needed to live. We didn't have any food. Because, you know, when you put a price tag on food, you put a price tag on people's lives. If you don't have any money, you just won't eat. And in America, that's true. You don't have any money, you won't be able to eat, and you'll die. Because you must eat. If you don't have any money, you won't be able to get any dental care. You know, you have a dental plan that'll take out your teeth, but it won't give you a cat. Now I'm hitting home, huh? Or you have the health care plan where you can get breast cancer treatments, but you won't get your pay after 6 months. So you make a decision, should I continue to get chemotherapy, or should I go back to work? My friend Rashida made that decision. She went back to work, so she just died of breast cancer, so she could keep up the work insurance plan for her children. You know how you make those kinds of decisions? You know, should I get a mammogram? You know, tell a friend. I love that one. Tell a friend, where are you going to get a mammogram for free? Not many of those, believe me. So should I get a mammogram, or should I pay my rent? You know, you make decisions like that, you know. There's a price tag on your head for health care and all the things, other things that you need to live. And so the Black Panther Party said, this is the expression of our oppression, and we need to change that. So the question was, how could we make that change? Martin Luther King analyzed in 1967, 68, just before he organized the Poor People's Campaign. If you can remember, you know, most of us, when we think about Martin Luther King, we like him. We don't remember much about him, really. Had a dream, something about some children walking up a mountain holding hands. You know, not sure what the dream was about, but we know he had one. Forgot that somebody slew the dreamer and who that was. But Martin Luther King said at the end of his life, where do we go from here? 64, 65 Civil Rights Acts were passed. We have our little civil rights, but we have half of what is good in America and double of what is bad. It's almost the way it is today. Only I think it would be, the percentages would be greater for the bad and less for the good. So Martin Luther King tells us this, and we said in the Black Panther Party that the only way we could be free was to make some sort of fundamental change in the construct of society, because our oppression didn't arise from the sky. It arose from something. And so I want to talk a little bit about that something, because I want to get back to the question of gender and politics today. We have to look a little bit at how we came to be oppressed, because if we don't understand the nature of the oppression, then we won't understand the nature of how to get out of that, or the strategies for how to be free, and that we actually need to be free. And I think it's important that we revisit this history very briefly to remember that blacks did not come to this country seeking a better life. We did not come here looking for religious freedom or a good job. We came here, of course, as slaves. I'm not going to talk about slavery and the horrors of it, the holocaustal horrors of it. I'm not going to talk about generation upon generation living and dying as slaves, without names, without any hope for the next day, uprisings, put down quickly, and so forth and so on. And so we get 150 years of slavery, the buildup of cotton in Georgia and rice in South Carolina, and everybody else is benefiting from around the country, the few little states that have started to form. Because remember, the country wasn't really a country. In the beginning it was a company, remember? The London Company. That's what the United States started out as. It didn't start out as a country for religious freedom. Let's work with the Native Americans and have Thanksgiving together. It started out as a company called the London Company. And what did the London Company do? It was looking to make some money, and so it ended up sponsoring the complete destruction of the destruction of the native people in the state of Virginia, the entire Powhatan Confederacy, all 30 tribes, including Pocahontas' daddy and everybody else. And after murdering all of them, it formed Virginia. That was pretty easy. And then it had to have some black people to work the fields and develop the product, market products, because these products were not just for living, they were for market. Cotton, as I said, was king in Georgia because it was, Georgia was producing and marketing the greatest amount of cotton in the world. By the time we got to the beginning of the formation of the United States in 1776, as South Carolina was the greatest producer of rice in the world, off the backs of African slaves. And then there were only one group of slaves, and of course those were Africans and our descendants. And as the country formed in 76, it became what? A slaveholding nation. You know, when we get excited about the Constitution of the United States, we have to remember this was formed as a slaveholding nation. And why is that important? Because every time you salute the flag, remember, this is the flag of slaveholding nation. That's how I feel about it. So when people in the South where I live get excited about the Confederate flag, I said, can't see the difference. Tell me where it is. Some people don't like the Confederate flag. I don't care whether it's a Confederate flag or the other flag. They're both the same to me because they're the flag of a slaveholding nation. Huh? But in any case, the country declares its independence. Why? Because it can. It's got so much money. Don't need you, England. I'm not paying you any taxes, meaning I'm not giving you a cut off all this money. We have too much money that we don't even need to be a part of England. We're declaring our independence. Architect of the Declaration of Independence is Thomas Jefferson. We love Thomas Jefferson today. We just say, okay, well, he was a slaveholder, but he was a man of his time. This kind of doesn't count, you know what I mean? It doesn't count. He had a slave mistress, as though she was making choices. We don't call her, we don't say that she was the victim of rape, do we? Sally Hemings, I'm speaking of. We don't say that Sally Hemings was the victim of rape. We say she was a slave mistress. There's another time. He was a man of his time. We still have to celebrate the good things he did, not understanding what they might be, because I have no idea. He had some beautiful language that he ripped off from a variety of other people, but he did not have any moral fiber that I can look to, because this is a man who justified slavery by saying that the African was inherently inferior. Notes on the state of Virginia. And what does he say in notes? He says, you know, even their color, that immovable veil of black, it's distasteful. Their hair is not long and flowing. Their bodies tend to have a bad odor. They have no music or art or intellect among them. He says, I, Thomas Jefferson, say that the black is inferior to the white in both body and mind. And that the only time there's been any improvement is with the first pass of white blood. This is the country called the United States of America. Now, we're the black people sitting down here being inferior, but yet able to produce all the cotton and all the rice and make the country able to be independent. And for the rest of the time until 1865 remained slaves under the law. And at the end of the Civil War, which we'll get into, 1865, we had the passage of the 13th Amendment. But before it's ratified, we had the passage of the Black Codes. Before the ratification of the 13th Amendment, we have the passage of the Black Codes. And why is this important? Because it dictated black life in such a vicious way. And we had also the rise of white terrorist organizations like the Ku Klux Klan. You know, we don't think of white terrorists, even though we know about Timothy McVeigh, it kind of doesn't count. In our minds, terrorists have names like Abdul, you know what I mean? And we don't think of white terrorists like Ku Klux Klan or Timothy McVeigh. And I say that to say it's important for us to make a correct analysis of the situation so we don't have come to incorrect conclusions and then go about our business in the wrong way. And in the meantime, during the end of that century and the rise of industrialization, which is really the issue in the war, we find white immigrants being called in to be exploited as industrial workers, right? And the population shifts in America. You know, blacks had the majority in the South by that time. So some white people had to be brought into the country. Believe me, that was part of the goal. And so the white immigrants from Ireland Italy and all those places come in, give me your tired report, you know that piece, come in to work the industrial fields. And they fought each other. Irish didn't like the Italians, Polish didn't like the Germans, whoever didn't like whoever, but I can tell you one thing, everybody became white and united when it came to black people. Make sure those blacks don't come up and get those jobs in the factory so we will be exploited workers. And we never understood how we were being played, you know what I mean? How, you know, the robber barons, the Baileys, the Banks, and the Biddles, and all those boys that were coming up were trying to pit one group against another. We actually started fighting each other. Black people fighting to get a job, Irish fighting to keep us from getting a job, all that kind of stuff, right? So by the time we get to the turn of the century, we have Booker T. Washington say, look, I'm not even trying to marry your daughter. We can be separate as the 5 fingers on a hand as the social issue. Don't worry about me, but I do need some money. Marcus Garvey coming in, saying, I'm looking at Booker T. Washington, we have to talk about an independent black economy. Du Bois and the NAACP coming in saying, we've got to integrate ourselves, improve ourselves. And NAACP, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, so forth and so on. Struggle against lynching, struggle to find a job, struggle to find a place to live, struggle to find health care, struggle to get an education. But the rule of Jim Crow under the Plessy decision, we fought, but we lost every year, year in and year out. Until we get to 1954, a little break, remember? Little Linda Brown trying to go to school. You know, people tell me the black people don't want to go to school. It amazes me because they must have forgotten about Brown. They forgot. And when 1954 came and our people said, here's little Linda Brown's dad said, look, little Linda cannot continue to walk 4 miles down the road to go to an inferior school. Separate is not equal as to public education. The court agreed. And there were big, violent fights. You remember all those little children going to school, little mama combed their hair and put the little dress on them. So and 50,000 troops have to take them to school. People spit on them. You can bring the spit out their dress at the end of the day just to get an education. And we're in 1954 already. Huh? And by the time we get to 1955, of course, we have that great moment, Rosa Parks trying to get on the bus the way Plessy tried to get on the train. And Rosa Parks says, I paid my money, I just want to get on the bus. I don't have my 40 acres that was promised to me under the Sherman Field Order number 15 back in 1865. Don't have my 40 acres, don't have a job, can't get one, don't have any place to live, discrimination, don't have any money anyway. All these things, and I'm just trying to get a seat on the bus. People fought back. Finally, we move into this big moment where Martin Luther King comes in with his great moral voice, telling us that we've got to make a change in America. We cannot continue to be calling ourselves a land of the free with all these oppressed black people and so forth. All these wonderful things. Good 63 speech talking about all the wonderful things. And by 64, 65, we have the Civil Rights and Voting Rights Acts that Johnson makes a concession while marching into Vietnam, invading Vietnam, giving something to black folks so they can go die and kill in Vietnam. And Martin Luther King said, but where do we go from here? So this is when the Black Panther Party comes into play in 1966 and says that we have to have a correct analysis. We're not oppressed because we did something wrong. We're not oppressed because we're genetically inferior, in fact. We're oppressed because there's been a long train of things that has abused us for so many years and kept us, pardon me, apart from our human rights to live. And so in order for us to be free, we have to make fundamental change in America. You know, there were a lot of blacks who were talking about having a black nation. And I remember that one of them went down to Mississippi and tried to claim a county in Mississippi. And the county sheriff said, the nation's over. You got like 2 minutes to get up out of here, you know. You got to have an army or something else going for you if you're going to form a nation in the United States of America. But the point is that we have to have a correct analysis. And so we said, in order for us to be free, there has to be fundamental change in the scheme of things. This business of human exploitation, of one group exploiting another, has to be changed. And we said, from a moral point of view, and from a strategic point of view, we cannot imagine the freedom of black people without understanding that it cannot come while the native people are oppressed. And so we helped to form the coalition with the American Indian Movement, AIM. We said, how can we be free in America with the Chicanos working the fields of California the same way the slaves worked the fields of Georgia? How can we call ourselves free in the light of that? And so we said we cannot. So we formed a coalition, helped to form a coalition with the Brown Berets. How can we talk about the freedom of black people in the context of the oppression of Puerto Ricans working the industrial fields in New York and elsewhere? And we said we couldn't, and so we helped to form a coalition with the Young Lords. How can we talk about the freedom of black people in the context of the oppression of poor whites in America, those running the ridges of Appalachia? And we said we couldn't, and so we formed a coalition with the Young Patriots. And how can we talk about the freedom of black people when one half the nation was oppressed in the form of women? And we were the only black organization, as a matter of fact, the only progressive organization in America that said that the liberation of women was a part of the agenda of black liberation and the agenda of the Black Panther Party. How can we be free when gays were exploited and oppressed in America? And we certainly took some hits on that one, and we said we cannot. And so the liberation of gay people, and what about people who are older and senior in the society, have not the ability to take care of themselves and so forth? How can we talk about our freedom in the context of that? And we know about the great Panthers, don't we? And how can we talk about the freedom of black people when people who are limited in their access to life because of their physical disabilities, how can we talk about our freedom in the context of their oppression? We said we can, so we formed a coalition with the Center for Independent Living and helped to create some of the conditions so people could have access to the things that they needed to live if they happened to be locked in wheelchairs and other disabilities. How can we talk about the freedom of black people in the context of the South African blacks oppressed under apartheid? And we said we can, so we formed a coalition with the PAC. And what about our brothers and sisters in Zimbabwe? We formed a coalition with ZANU. And what about our brothers and sisters in Mozambique? And we formed a coalition with Frelimo. And what about our friends in Northern Ireland? And we formed a coalition with the IRA. And what about our friends in Cuba and our friends in China and our comrades fighting in Vietnam? We said we cannot talk about the freedom of black people in the context of the oppression of any human being. And we became international revolutionaries or intercommunal revolutionaries. Thank you very much. No, thank you. And how can we not understand this connection? So I say that when we bring this analysis to today, and this is one of the legacies that I believe the Black Panther Party does bring, a correct analysis of the nature of our oppression. If we speak about the question of gender today, we have to talk about the nature of women's oppression. We cannot imagine that this is a conversation and talk about what kind of world we want to live in and what role women will play. What role do women have to play other than to be human beings? We have to talk about women's liberation. We can't talk about feminism. I don't know what feminism is per se. Let's talk about the liberation of women. Let's talk about the ending of exploitation and oppression of women. Now there are people who like to talk about, let's talk about breaking through the glass ceiling. You got people like Elizabeth Dole talking about breaking through the glass ceiling. That ought to tell you right away something's wrong with that kind of stuff. Elizabeth Dole is a champion of breaking through the glass ceiling. So that we would then say that we will become equal partners with men in the oppression of other people. We have people like Condoleezza Rice. Now, you know, I'm not going to go too far. But you know, I do have to say something. You know, I can't let it go. First of all, I would just like to say that, you know, when Bill Cosby talks about ghetto names, talks about the Shaniquas and Shanterias and them, and like that's the reason we're not successful because we're naming our children stupid names like Shaniqua. He also said Muhammad, but that's another conversation. So Bill Cosby says that these, but I didn't hear him say anything about Condoleezza. You know nobody white is naming their child Condoleezza. That's a ghetto name. Her mama made that up and spelled it wrong too. But Condoleezza Rice is the ultimate example. She's not up in the videos being bootylicious. You know how we get all upset about the video, like that's the only issue about feminism. Like we're worried about something. You know, if I had a body like Beyonce, trust me, I'd be probably up in the video shaking it, trust me. If I had that body, I saw that girl on the floor, I said, good God Almighty, how did she even do that stuff, you know? So I'm saying, if I look that good, I might be in the video. But my point is simply this, that is not our issue. It's among the issues. You know, I knew the sisters at Spelman College. You might not remember this, some of you might remember. I'll show you some cultural differences. There's a rapper named Nelly who had out a video called Tip Drill. Now some of you are saying, what is she even talking about? A rapper named Nelly had a piece out called Tip Drill. Everybody got mad because it was misogynistic. You know, he had a credit card and he swiped it on a girl's behind. Everybody said, oh, that's so disgusting. They don't say anything about Sony and Time Warner producing all this stuff, right? But we don't worry about Nelly. You know? Now, of course, this is terrible. But we have to line up our priorities and decide where we want to go with this. If you want to end the Bootylicious video, you have to find out what is the nature of it, how did it come to be. But it's not going to be by shutting that piece down. So these girls at Spelman went crazy and told Nelly he couldn't come to Spelman and blah, blah, blah. But actually he was coming to Spelman to try to get blacks conscious about the fact that we didn't have enough organ donors because his sister was dying of leukemia and wanted to get a complete blood transfusion. But so they had an incorrect analysis, is my point. Nelly was not the main problem in the life of these. I mean, this would mean that we don't mind. We'll say, well, that's all right. We can have some lesbian generals at Abu Ghraib prison, and we'll feel all right about that because women have arrived. This is the analysis that's wrong. What is it that we want to do? And that's what we have to remember. What is it that what is our agenda? We've lost track of agenda as women in America. I knew we lost track when Bill Clinton promoted the welfare reform bill and nobody said a mumbling word. People were silent. I didn't hear anybody jumping up and getting mad. I didn't see 10 million women marching the way they marched for abortion rights. I did not see that. The criminalization of poor women by Clinton was so horrible I couldn't even imagine it. Saying that you need to get up off your behind, Shantiqua, and get you a job because you're having all these babies out of wedlock and you got those deadbeat men all around you, and everybody thought he was talking about black women. And that's why they voted for it. Nobody said anything. But as it turns out, the largest number of women who were affected were white women. Poor white women living probably not too far from here. Isn't the Appalachian chain running through somewhere along here? If you look a little bit, you might find a few women who can't get a job and don't have any way of getting anything. Matter of fact, the governor of Kentucky during that time told all those women in the hollers of Kentucky, you're going to have to come on down and get yourself a job at McDonald's. We're tired of your trifling selves living up there in the hollers, having all those babies by your cousins. You know, that's how they talk to people. So we're tired of that. And the women said, well, we live up here, and this is what we do. We have to change our whole life? They said, yeah, you're going to have to change your life. You're going to come down those hills, and you're not going to get any more checks. Won't be any signing up there in the house. Bill Clinton did that. You know, a lot of people thought Bill Clinton was the first black president. I wasn't one of them. He's one of the most reactionary. Thanks to Bill Clinton, we had the 3 strikes crime bill, doubling of all the number of people in prison from 1994. And then, thanks to Bill Clinton, we had the so-called welfare reform bill. If you're not working, you lazy, no good person, you need to work. And this is what we said to women, and we meant it to women. You got all these children, don't have them. Get an abortion. Go to Planned Parenthood, especially if you're black and poor. We don't really want, if you're rich and Catholic, you can have 27 children. But if you're black and poor, you better have any, because that means I got to take care of them. I don't want to take care of the children. I want to put my money into killing women in Iraq. I don't want to take care of your children. I love to go and kill some women in Iraq. We don't even know what the feminist agenda is anymore. We have forgotten what we're about here. And so we have to get back to a correct analysis. We have to decide what is the place of abortion rights on our agenda. You know, I know a sister named Fannie Lou Hamer. And she opposed abortion because she had been sterilized against her will, like a number of other black women in the state of Mississippi around that time. We have to make a decision. You want to tell a Latina Catholic that she better figure out how not to have all those babies because she has the right to choose, and the right to choose means she probably shouldn't have so many children? Is this the #1 issue in our agenda? We have to make a decision. We have to oppose violence toward women and the rape of women, but we have to determine that it cannot exist as long as that is going to go forward as long as we have a patriarchy. We have the same situation. You want to clean up rape and violence against women in a state, in a country run by George Bush? Have to have a correct analysis. I think the first thing we have to decide again is that we want to be free. And then we have to understand that we don't have competing interests with other people. Black people and women do not have to be competing for the attention of the world to say, well, is this a gender issue or is this a black issue? We're not competing. That's the capitalist situation. There's enough freedom around here for all of us.
Right.
Buckminster Fuller said there's enough money here for all of us to be millionaires if we just distribute the money properly. Okay? We don't have to have competing interests. You know the way blacks today, you know the whole Mexican question with immigrants? Because it's really not an immigrant question. It's a Mexican question. And the reason we know that is because nobody's worried about French immigrants. No? Oh my God, the French, you know, coming into the border. The Canadians are coming in. It's a Mexican question. And really it's a labor question, of course. It's a money question. It's an economic question. It's that. But we thought it was an immigration question because we've cast it that way. And I had black friends tell me, these Mexicans are taking our jobs. I'm like, you ain't had a job in 10 years. What job is it that a Mexican is taking from you? And so we start seeing our little interests separately. And we don't understand that while we may have different issues, because one of the problems of so-called feminists in America is they don't want to understand the race issue. And as a black woman, I got to deal with all of this. Not to count being poor. You know, I had a woman ask me, said, do you think it's worse to be black or female or poor? I said, the only person who asked me that is a person who's never been hungry. It's a pretty obvious answer. If you are hungry and living on the street, not something I will ever be doing. But if you're hungry and living on the street, you're not really thinking about gender issues or black issues, trust me. You're really just trying to get some food. You have a very common issue with everybody else who's hungry. And the reason I'll never live on the streets is because as long as there are homes in the world, I will be having one of them. And it might be your home, because I will be a home invader if I don't have a place to sleep. I'm coming in. And if you don't, and I'm looking for my room, and what we gonna eat today. And if you don't have a room for me, then if we can't share, then you're gonna have to get out. Because I'm not leaving. If there's food, I'm going to get it. I don't care. You know, if I have to sell crack, I'll sell crack, trust me. So when everybody gets excited, oh, it's hard for people to sell crack, really? Let me tell you about the economy in certain neighborhoods and how they make it every single day where they cannot get fresh vegetables and things like that. So the question is finding some common ground and understanding that we have common ground because we also have a common oppressor. It's the unholy triumvirate, the unholy trinity of the U.S. government, its military, and its corporations. I can't even tell the difference between Halliburton, Bush, and the military. Can you? I don't know the difference. It's all one organization. And so when we recognize that, and we recognize that we don't have to fight everybody, that we can find common ground issues the way we did in the Black Panther Party, forming coalitions around our common oppression, then we can begin to get back to the question of the freedom of women. And the freedom of women can come only if we recognize it has to be fundamental change. And when we recognize that a brother with a grill and a do-rag is not your enemy, even if he wants to be your enemy, can't be your enemy. Bush has got the hands on all those guns. You know, Huey Newton used to say that one of the reasons everybody tried to tell us about nonviolence in the state is because the state reserves violence for itself. When we recognize what we are talking about, then we'll recognize where we need to go from here, as Dr. King said. And so I think that for now, one of the things we should get back to is to end this horrible law that's criminalized women and allow women to have the kind of assistance that we need to take care of our children. And stop trying to make these social questions of whether or not the man is there or not there and all this other stuff. Let's worry about the fact that there are some children, because women and their children are the poor of the world, particularly black women and our children are the poor of the world. We need to get back to the agenda of that. And how can we do that? I think we can use the ballot. And the reason I think we can use the ballot is because nobody's willing to use the bullet. And until you're ready to use the bullet, unite, you might as well go ahead and use the ballot. But we need to vote and organize ourselves around voting. And people said to me when I ran for office in Brunswick, they said, well, you know, that's such a reform thing to do. Or I had an organization called the National Alliance for Radical Prison Reform. So why do you want to reform the prison? Let's just get rid of the prisons. I said, all right, I'm prepared to go up to the prison right now with a tank, are you? Because that's the only way the prison walls are going to come down today, unless you're going to vote for some people to vote the prison walls down. Now, I don't think you're prepared to do all that, so let's get to the agenda you are prepared to deal with. And that is voting and using the ballot to make some change. And I think that this year is an opportunity. It's certainly not an opportunity. Don't let me get started on Democrats and Republicans because my time is up. We already know that is one organization, one party, just like the government, the military, and the corporations are one. But I think that we can find different candidates in local elections to seize different spots. Of course, you know what I feel about, what's this Negro's name running for? Blackwell. Had the nerve enough to have the name of Blackwell. Oh my goodness. Will we ever be free? No. So I say that to say we have a correct analysis. And I want to just finish by just mentioning one other thing. You know, people say to me when I talk sometimes about reparations, they say, well, you're just talking about reparations for blacks. What about the Indians? I said, I want them to have reparations too. What about the Irish reparations? What about everybody? Redistribution of the wealth. Let's get to the real agenda. Let's have some redistribution of the wealth, some guaranteed incomes, some guaranteed health care. Let's have all of that. But let's focus on what is our agenda. And stop competing and using the models that capitalists have already taught us and get back to a real agenda that goes to what we want to be, and that is free. And put that into place. In the end, serving the interests of all human beings until, as King did in fact say, and did in fact dream, all of us can actually say, not just in America, but on this planet, that we are free at last. Free at last. Thank you very much.
Before we take questions, I just wanted to announce that if you are a student at the University of Akron, you're invited to have lunch with Elaine Brown. She will be having pizza, and it will be free. So sometimes that makes students hang around a little bit. But I think you'll hang around today to just be around Elaine Brown. So I wanted to let you know that. So that if you are a student and you have questions, I'm going to ask that you possibly save them. I also wanted to just make the announcement that we do have her books available in the lobby, and that following her presentation that she would be happy to sign a book.
Right.
So, question.
I want to just introduce two people that are my friends in the audience. One is my beautiful daughter, Erica Abram. And my comrade and friend who co-founded the National Alliance for Radical Prison Reform, who's a radical ex-prisoner and a brilliant man, probably the smartest man I've met other than Huey P. Newton, Khalil Osiris. And I want to say one little point about feminism, because somebody asked me, my daughter changed her, when she got married, she changed her name from Brown to Abram. So somebody said, why would your daughter give up her name? I said, Brown wasn't her name. Brown was the name of some slave master somewhere, okay? Let's not get excited. All those last names are men's names. So the patriarchy, you see, we make incorrect analysis and get excited about stuff that's not right, and we forget, we see the forest, don't see the forest for the trees. Okay, couple quick questions. Yes, sir.
How did the black community let the white Republican patriarchy make the gay community the Jim Crow of the 2000s?
Well, wait a minute. Let's not say the black community now. You're talking about those preachers with an ATM machine in it, please. Let me tell you who the black community is, okay? Because it's not those preachers. You know, we have some preachers in Georgia who have ATM machines for Jesus. I'm not making this up. They're in the church. Just in case your check bounces. You know, they forgot about Jesus coming and turning over the tables.
Yes. Sure.
If Jesus came down here now and tried to mess with their ATM machine, they would put him up there quicker than Pontius Pilate. But anyway, they mess with the ATM now in the church. I was in Atlanta at the time that Georgia attempted to pass the same bill you had here in Ohio, which was called Amendment Number 1 to, well, gay marriage was already outlawed in the state of Georgia. So what they were now going to outlaw was just your right to even look like you couldn't have children that could inherit things, you couldn't have a house together, whatever. And so there was some civil rights to the unions of gays because they were outlawed. And I worked with a gay organization there, came and asked me if I would help them to go through the black community and do exactly, try to overcome some of this stuff. And I said yes. And I got together with a group of hip-hop, something called the Hip Hop Convention. And we were over in the West End, which is the hood, part of, not the deep, deep hood, but it's the hood. There's a deeper one. There's levels of hoods. People from Chicago know you have the South Side, but the West Side is the hood. Anyway, so we couldn't figure out what we could do because one of the problems with the gays, at least in the active groups, were they also had problems with their own racism. So let's call it like it is. All the little middle-class gay men with the little boutiques now don't want to see no black criminals rolling up in their areas and have actually organized against that in Atlanta. So that's the group of people who were the gay activists. And not only that, they got separate clubs. Blacks don't go to the gay clubs for white people.
That's right.
So you had a race issue inside of that. But albeit, I said, fine, I'll work with you. I'll go into university homes and everywhere else and get everybody to go vote no on one. You know why? Because most black people really didn't care. The churches that you saw that George Bush bought off, but where were the gays themselves? Half the churches got, everybody knows if you're in the black church, if one gay person playing the organ. If you've never been in a black church, you don't know what I'm talking about. One of the churches got a dance corps. Anyway. And they flaming, okay? So what I'm saying to you is, black people did not oppose gay marriage. Not black people. Most of the people in the hood, I went out with a young sister named Sherry, and we were walking. Here I am, old as dirt, trying to walk with petitions and stuff. And Mrs. King, for example, she was quoted, she was very active in supporting gay marriage. Very active. You have to know that. So don't say black people. Say the ones that got brought up by George Bush. So anyway, we walked like Eddie Long, Bishop Eddie Long. He was one of the big money. So we're walking through the community, and Sherry and I are walking through the community, and so there was some people standing out on the corner. And they said, so what's this about, no on one? We said, well, they don't want the people to get married because they're gay or whatever. They said, well, do y'all want to get married? That was the more typical response, because most black people really don't have time to worry about gay marriage. Truly, you have to know that. But how George Bush did this because he had money. And not only that, he organized people. And let me tell you what else he did. He went into poor white neighborhoods that the little middle-class gay men don't want to go into, okay? He went down there to the trailer camps, car rolls, said, look, you might not have any money or running water and no teeth, but you're not black and you're not gay. Vote for George Bush. Can you imagine all of Georgia, rural Georgia, Ohio kind of rural too. You know what I mean? Get outside of some of these cities, you don't know where you are. You know what I'm saying? And I'm telling you, the more liberal end and the more progressive end of America doesn't want to talk to poor people. Anybody going up into Appalachia talking about no on one? And that's one of the reasons that I say this analysis is important, that we have to remember that we are a part of each other. And if we remember that, then we won't have these class attitudes. The gay community needs to check itself. That is to say, the gay activists. You know, the Republican gay activists of that, who don't seem to have any problems with somebody like Foley is. Don't call him gay, he's a pedophile. You know, Foley said he was gay, more than I said. It's not my fault, everybody, I'm not responsible for Condoleezza Rice, they're not responsible for Foley. What's the point? It's like everybody said about whatever his name is in the FBI. I don't have nothing to do with Condoleezza Rice, you can't put her on me. So I'm saying being gay is not per se, but is it an oppressed group? It absolutely is. And I worked with them, and let me just finish this by saying, when we went around, they had money, the gays did, right? The gay coalition had money. The blacks who were in the hip-hop thing, doing vote or die all in the hood, they didn't have a dime. I said, okay, we need some buses to take some people. The gays give me some buses, and I'll carry your materials in the hood and give these people some free donuts from Krispy Kreme, yes. From Krispy Kreme owned by Hank Aaron. What's that, Hank Aaron's Krispy Kreme? And bought the donuts with the gay money, got the leaflets in the buses, and put the blacks down there on the vote or die, and they vote, and then told everybody, now when you go in their booth, make sure you vote no on one. They said, all right, baby. We turned out 5,000 votes, and I can tell you, if you look at the numbers in Georgia, there are pockets where there were high numbers of blacks who voted against no, we voted no on one, and those were in the pockets that we worked. And so we can form those kind of coalitions, but we have to recognize our problems, our differences, recognize that the gays, and analytically they have been, the activist gays have lost touch with their own sense of commitment to a larger agenda, and have become, and are settled in their own racism. And they have to correct that and correct themselves. So that's what I think about that particular question.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I agree with you. White gay males are very class conscious.
Right.
And it's horrible.
Right. And not to count race conscious. Okay, any more? Oh, good. Okay. That's it. Let's go. Oh, one more where? Okay.
Yes, Dr. Brown, thanks for taking time to come to Little old Akron. But you
Wait a minute, my child lives here.
You're not going to email back and forth for that art show.
Oh, Deborah Calhoun, she's an artist.
But I will play that art show.
Yeah, she can network a little bit. Come on.
My question is if you could speak a bit about the need for study. You talked about how the Panthers, and I'm a 60s child, encouraged and talked about the need to study and analyze globally to develop a humanist analysis to things.
Right.
But I find, and I'm a teacher at Stark Campus, Kent State, that our students are not reading.
Right.
They don't study, so consequently they have these very narrow kind of conservative views that is kind of ruling the day that we see on our newspapers and things. So could you talk a bit about the absolute need, not only for study groups, but more or less for our sisters, our women, to even study the more radicalized aspect of even women's history, because they don't study about, we don't know about Alice Stone, we don't know about Alice Paul, or Lucy Stone and Alice Paul, we don't know about those women that fought for Native rights.
Right.
All we know is Elizabeth Cady.
Right.
We don't talk about Frederick Douglass breaking with her.
Right.
Over the question of the vote. So I guess I'm...
Which was a rough moment, wasn't it?
Very ugly. But I praise Frederick for making that move.
Oh, yeah?
Because for that point, for the black community, that was needed.
Right.
But if you could speak a bit about this, the whole importance of really expanding our view, because it was so narrow here.
Well, I think you're right, obviously, but the only way we're going to do that is to be able to have a public education system that operates in the interest of the people, and that's where the breakdown comes. You have elementary schools where, first of all, let's just talk about how much teachers get paid.
Okay.
Now, my position is that a starting salary for a kindergarten and first grade teacher should be at least $150,000 a year. Why? Because it's the most important month. By the time they get to Kent State, it's a done deal. Okay? You got a bunch of idiots walking around with $35,000, and that's how they got there. Because you can pay your way into school. You know, people say, I'm going to do this and that and that. If you don't have some money, you're not going to college in America. Unless you go to community college, and everybody pretends they don't want to go to community college. And you still not get any real information. That's the other part. Most people are in college to get a job. I'm here because I'm on track to do this. I'm not even trying to learn anything. I'm not trying to be enriched. What are you talking about? Liberal arts? What? I don't even understand that. I'm on track to get a job. So I can become a cog in the wheel, and I can ignore the war like everybody else, because if I get involved with the war, then I might lose my scholarship or my Pell Grant or whatever I'm in here on. So most people in college are not even there to study in the first place, because the whole setup is a game. It's a setup. So we have to start in the elementary levels. We start our own school. That's what we did. We didn't even vote for the integration of schools. We didn't vote for busing. We didn't care. We said, what's the point? You're going to bus from, oh, I'm going to be bad black school to bad white school. You know, I would feel better about it. South Boston? Who's going to South Boston school? Well, the Irish trying to get out of South Boston. You understand what I'm saying? So my point is that we have got to create the conditions for us to have a real education and real information passed to us. Our children at the elementary school who cannot read, the reason they cannot read is because nobody is concerned with them reading. And there's another reason too, is because there are kids like this boy here, little B. You know, when you have to get up in the morning and you're 8 years old and you live in the crack house, it's kind of hard to think about what you're going to do at school other than to get a free breakfast and a free lunch. You know, it's like, wait a minute, did I do my homework? Did I go home with my pens? And first of all, I don't even have home. Let's talk about home. Wait a minute, did I go to bed? Oh, I don't have a bed. Middle class question. Did I eat dinner? Don't eat dinner. I'm waiting for breakfast at school. Ladies, my whole life is about going to school to eat breakfast. Now, there are a lot of people like that. Their children being molested in their homes that nobody talks about. They're getting up in the morning mad at everybody, you know, because they can't tell nobody and all that. People been all kinds of things going on. So the school, for me, is so important. My dream is to recreate a model school that we had in the Black Panther Party to show that you have to address all of those issues as well as information. But I can't hear you if I'm hungry.
All right.
And I can't see you if I've got problems at home. You know? And so we addressed everything. We met children who had never brushed their teeth. And we brushed their teeth, you know, combed people's hair that had never been combed. You know, we had a whole little area where we brought our children, we had 400 some children in our school, and we bought clothes for them, brand new clothes. We didn't have the little church program where you get the little third and fourth, you know, the little clothes that nobody want, and they just feel bad throwing them out, you know, so they give them to somebody, and somebody that's supposed to actually wear that stuff. We bought our children brand new clothes. We provided 3 meals a day. We had little vans taking them back and forth through the hood so they didn't have to get on the bus worried about getting killed trying to get to school. And they were safe at school. And they were there from 7 in the morning to 7 in the evening, and we had to kick them out to go home. And then we provided homes for some of them. We tried to create home environments. We had kids who, parents in those days, were on heroin. They went home. What difference did it make if they went? Nobody knows when they were there or not. So we went ahead and built little houses for them. You know, had them in our dormitories with our own children. And I think we have to understand that it's so big, the problem of education of children, because it goes to the whole social construct in which they have to live, and particularly for poor children and children who are struggling. Listen, poor parents are like this. School is out on the summer. This is parents' nightmare. What the hell am I going to do for 2 months with these children? I got to go to school, go to work, or somebody trying to go to school, go to work. I had 2 jobs. 2 and a half, once I had 3, didn't I? 3, and I only had 1 child. I don't even know how these people manage with 2 children, much less more than 2. I had 1 child, and I was struggling with 3 jobs. I went to law school. I had 2 jobs and was in law school.
And no car.
And no car. Because I had $1,700 worth of parking tickets. But anyway. But my point is, you can't go there. But what we could do, I believe, is to create liberation schools, to try to catch up on some of this other stuff that hasn't been done. But it's the youngest children who really have to be addressed. And no, I want to say last thing, I've seen a lot of college students who cannot write. You know, they talk about ebonics and all of this other stuff, and these poor black children. But let me tell you something. I haven't seen anybody that knows how to speak the English language very well lately, or use the English language, you know. Because, you know, everybody hoobie-boos in their own little way. You know, hoobie-booing down in the hood. But the point is that we've got to learn the standard English language because this is the language of our oppressor. So we have to know how to understand what he's telling us, what he's telling it to us. You know, because we know black folks are very inventive with language, which is why I like rap. I like rap because it's a continuation of the oral tradition, and it's a beautiful thing. Some of the messages are ugly and stupid, but no uglier and stupid than the ones I listened to when I was growing up, listening to Working With Me Annie, you know. I guess nobody's old enough to remember that. That didn't even get a laugh. But anyway, so yeah, I think there's no solution, but I think one way to address it is to create our own schools for now, because unless you can get that big government money, and then you'll be writing grants and spending 3 more years writing grants, you know, and then then you have to follow all the little rules of the grant. Somebody's going to come in and monitor that, and they're going to tell you you're not doing well, and all. Yeah, excuse me, cut out things and so forth. So I think the best thing is to begin to think in terms of how can I create some kind of a model, because that's what I really want to do myself. And that model has to include addressing the whole child. The whole child. And we have all the studies in the world. We don't need any more studies. We know how to teach math. We know how to teach English. Know what the problems are. We got the Annie Casey Foundation will tell you. Got the Marion Wright Edelman's organization. We have all the statistics on what children need. We're just not addressing it. And I think that's the only way you're going to get from there to education. But how do we educate? How do we teach our people? They were so committed, they made a commitment. They made a commitment to be in the Black Panther Party. And once they made that commitment, we had people who could not read at 16 and 17 years old. But we said, listen, this is part of what you have to do every day. You got to clean your gun, cook your breakfast, sell your papers, and read. Those are the basic things you had to do every day. And so people started learning how to read and analyze and so forth. And I think that it is important, but the commitment was there. And so we have to find a way to get these young people committed. And lastly, I'll say this. That whole hip-hop rap thing that people want to put down, and so many, especially older people, want to put down, that is one of the best instruments that you can use to organize young people around reading and thinking. This is the first time young black men have been articulate. We've been silent. We've been living in the hood silent all these years. They have come up and said something. You didn't give us music in school. You didn't give us anything else. You left us down here in the hood. And we don't even have any other way to express ourselves. And we invented scratching records and coming up with an articulation of our rage. And they have come up with an articulation of their rage. Now, they don't have always a correct analysis, and some of it is crazy and petty, and some of it is misogynistic and all that other stuff. But they have found a way to articulate, and they love to write. Believe me, these young brothers are out here writing every day. Can't write very well, but they're writing. And that is already an opening for us to use that, to flip that into hip-hop piece, into something else. Anyway, I guess that's it. Thank you all very, very much for your kind attention. And,
you know, I'm a child of the 60s myself. I'm a little old, and it's just so exciting to hear someone from that time. And sometimes I think about what it was like for black students in my university, because it's only now that I'm beginning to realize how they were brand new there. You know, it never struck me as a student that the young black students that I sat next to class in were some of the very first black students to go to any school, and I'm really just now having that realization. So again, I want to remind you that Elaine will be out in the lobby in order to sign her books, which are out there now, and she will be here during the lunch hour also to meet with students if you're able to stay. So thank you again so much. Our next speaker is Lisa Matz, and I want to tell you, these things really do follow, because Lisa is a liberal lobbyist, for lack of a better way of talking about it, for the American Association of University Women in D.C. And she's going to talk about how Washington really works and her experience of being a lobbyist. So I hope that you will move down if you're...
Yes.
Yes. If you're moved down... Pardon me? Oh, she's saying, can we take a break? I think that's a great...
One times one is one. One times two is two. One times three is three. One times four is four. One times five is five. One times six is six. One times seven is seven. One times eight is eight. One times nine is nine. One times 10 is 10. One times 11 is 11. One times 12 is 12.